We grow up believing that our mothers are supposed to be everything: protectors, nurturers, comforters, the constant heartbeat of our world. As children, we see them through the lens of survival. They are our first source of love and sometimes our first source of pain. But the truth Brené Brown teaches, and one that feels both liberating and heavy, is that healing begins when you stop seeing your mother as a symbol and start seeing her as a human being. Your mother carried her own history long before you existed. She had fears that were never named, heartbreaks that were never healed, and dreams that were quietly buried under responsibility. Maybe she grew up in a household where emotions were forbidden, or love was conditional, or silence was safety. Without knowing it, she carried that emotional DNA into your life. When she raised her voice, withdrew affection, or seemed unable to understand you, it wasn't always about you. It was about the story she was still trapped in, the one that started before you were born. Understanding this doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it allows you to look at your mother with new eyes, not as the source of all your wounds, but as a woman doing the best she could with what she had. Brené Brown often says that empathy is the antidote to shame. When you apply empathy to your mother, even quietly, from a distance, something begins to shift inside you. The anger, the confusion, the why wasn't I enough, starts to lose its grip because you realize it was never about your worth. It was about her capacity. Many of us hold on to an invisible ledger, a list of the ways our mothers failed us. She wasn't there. She was too strict. She loved unevenly. She couldn't protect us. But Brené's work invites us to replace judgment with curiosity. What happened to her? What shaped her reactions? What made her afraid to love fully or to let go of control? That shift doesn't erase accountability, but it transforms resentment into understanding. And understanding is where healing quietly begins to grow roots. When you see your mother's humanity, you stop chasing the impossible fantasy of what she should have been. You stop waiting for her to finally say the right words or make up for the lost years. You begin to see that her silence or her sharpness came from unhealed places. You might even recognize her in yourself. The same tone, the same fear, the same instinct to protect or to withdraw. That's the uncomfortable mirror Brené Brown often talks about. When we look at the people who hurt us, we sometimes find echoes of ourselves. Recognizing your mother's imperfection isn't betrayal. It's truth-telling. It's breaking the generational cycle of silence, the one that says, we don't talk about pain, we just endure it. When you allow yourself to name what happened without shame, without rage, without the need to make her a villain, you reclaim your voice. And that's the first step toward healing, not from her, but within yourself. From the moment you were born, you were absorbing everything your mother said and did, not just her words, but her silences, her glances, her sighs. Without realizing it, she became the blueprint for how you understood love, safety, and worth. Brené Brown often says, stories are data with a soul, and the story your mother lived became the data that shaped your emotional world. Maybe your mother taught you that strength meant never crying, that being good meant being quiet, that love had to be earned through obedience or achievement. Maybe she taught you that your needs were too much, or that your emotions made people uncomfortable. These lessons weren't always spoken aloud. They were modeled, repeated, and absorbed until they became invisible truths. And the hardest part, most of them weren't even hers. She inherited them from her own mother, who inherited them from hers like emotional heirlooms passed through generations. Some of those beliefs might have served you well for a time. They helped you survive, navigate, achieve. They made you resilient. But others may have quietly become cages, teaching you to distrust vulnerability, to fear rejection, to overgive in relationships, to confuse love with self-sacrifice. Brené Brown calls this the armor we wear to protect ourselves from pain. It's the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, the constant proving. We tell ourselves, if I just get it right, maybe I'll be enough. But the truth is, armor keeps pain out, and it also keeps love out. Understanding this key means recognizing that your mother didn't just raise you, she programmed you. And part of healing is learning to update that code. You start by identifying which beliefs you want to keep and which ones no longer serve you. Maybe she taught you kindness, persistence, or loyalty. Those are gifts worth keeping. But maybe she also taught you to hide your feelings, to avoid conflict, to put everyone else first. Those are the inherited wounds you're allowed to lay down. Brene reminds us that awareness is not blame. It's ownership. The moment you say, I learned this from her, but I don't have to live this way anymore, you begin to separate your story from hers. You reclaim your agency. You stop reacting from old programming and start responding from consciousness. That's the quiet rebellion of healing. You choose differently. You might find it unsettling at first, to question what your mother taught you, to admit that not everything she passed on was good for you. But this isn't betrayal, it's evolution. You're not dishonoring her by breaking the patterns. You're honoring both of you by refusing to let pain be only legacy. You're rewriting the script so the next generation doesn't have to start where you began. And maybe one day, when you catch yourself teaching someone else, a friend, a child, even yourself, you'll notice you're doing it with more gentleness, more honesty, more freedom. That's when you'll know this key has opened something deeper. The old beliefs no longer own you. You've started to write your own. Every family has a language of emotion, not the words, but the ways feelings are shown, hidden, or ignored. Before you could even speak, you were learning how your mother handled fear, anger, sadness, and shame. You watched her tone, her body language, her silences. You learned whether emotions were safe or dangerous, welcome or inconvenient. Brené Brown calls this the emotional blueprint, the unspoken lessons that shape how we show up in the world. If your mother numbed her feelings through business, caretaking, or perfectionism, you probably learned to do the same. If she lashed out when overwhelmed, you might have learned to tiptoe around conflict or to mirror that same intensity when you felt hurt. Maybe she smiled when she was breaking inside, and you learned to wear that same brave mask. These patterns aren't random. They're inherited strategies for survival. Your mother didn't invent them. She learned them too. In Brené's research, she often talks about armor, the behaviors we use to protect our hearts. Emotional coping styles are just another kind of armor. For some, it's control, believing if you can manage everything, nothing will fall apart. For others, it's detachment, convincing yourself that feelings only complicate things. And for many, it's people-pleasing, trying to regulate everyone else's emotions so you never have to feel your own. The tragedy is that these strategies work until they don't. When you reach adulthood, those inherited patterns begin to clash with your desire for connection. You want closeness, but you've been trained to avoid vulnerability. You want love, but you fear being seen too deeply. You crave peace, but you keep recreating chaos because it feels familiar. That's the invisible inheritance your mother left you. Not out of malice, but out of habit. She handed you the tools she had, even if they were blunt or broken. Understanding this doesn't mean blaming her. It means noticing where you're still carrying her coping patterns inside you, and choosing whether you still need them. Healing begins when you start to ask gentle questions. Why do I shut down when I'm hurt? Why do I over-explain to avoid conflict? Why do I feel guilty for resting? Every answer points to an emotional rule you once learned to stay safe. But safety isn't the same as freedom. Brené Brown reminds us that emotional courage, the willingness to feel deeply and stay open, is the foundation of real connection. So, when you notice yourself slipping into old coping patterns, pause. Instead of shaming yourself, thank them for how they protected you. Then, slowly, let them go. You no longer need to be the version of yourself who had to hide, please, or control to feel loved. You inherited your mother's emotional blueprint, but you also have the power to redraw it. You can teach your body that vulnerability is not weakness, that emotions aren't threats, that love doesn't require self-erasure. Each time you stay present with a feeling your mother couldn't face, you're not just healing yourself, you're healing the story she never got to finish. Every child comes into the world wired for connection. Before we even understand language, our bodies are searching for cues of safety. A gentle voice, a steady touch, eyes that say, "I see you." These signals teach us that it's okay to exist, to feel, to reach out. When those signals are missing, inconsistent, or conditional, we grow up with a quiet aches, the longing to be emotionally held. Brené Brown often says that we are hardwired for love and belonging, but we can't access either without feeling safe. Your mother was supposed to be your first safe place, the one who tuned into your cries, who mirrored your emotions, who made you feel understood. But if she was distracted, emotionally unavailable, or drowning in her own pain, she couldn't always attune to you. Maybe she was physically present, but emotionally distant. Maybe she comforted you one day and criticized you the next. Maybe her love depended on how well you behaved, how quiet you were, or how much you made her proud. Those experiences plant seeds of uncertainty. Is it safe to be myself? Am I lovable only when I'm good? That uncertainty often becomes the blueprint for adult relationships. You might find yourself craving closeness, yet fearing rejection, scanning every interaction for signs of abandonment. You might chase validation through achievement, perfectionism, or caretaking, trying to earn the love that should have been unconditional. Or perhaps you built walls so high that no one can truly reach you, because somewhere deep down, connection feels like risk, not refuge. Brené Brown's research on shame and belonging reveals that when our need for emotional safety isn't met, we internalize the belief that we are the problem. We stop saying, "My mother couldn't make me feel safe," and start believing, "I must be unworthy of safety." That shift from experience to identity is where the wound forms, and healing begins when you reverse it. You start by recognizing what was missing, not as blame, but as truth. You name the moments you needed comfort and got silence. You acknowledge the times you were shamed for needing too much. This isn't about judging your mother. It's about validating your inner child, the one who kept waiting for someone to say, "You're okay. You're enough." Validation isn't about fixing the past. It's about finally giving yourself what you deserved all along. As Brene says, "What can only love others to the extent that we love ourselves?" The same applies to healing. You can't build safety with anyone else until you build it within yourself. That means learning to listen to your emotions with curiosity instead of judgment. It means replacing self-criticism with compassion, self-abandonment with presence. Every time you sit with a feeling you once had to suppress, you send a new message to your nervous system: you're safe now. You don't have to hide anymore. Healing this key isn't about rewriting your mother's story. It's about reclaiming your own. You become the one who offers what you once needed: safety, attunement, and validation. And when that begins, even quietly, The wound that started in childhood starts to lose its power, not because someone fixed it for you, but because you finally stopped believing it was your fault. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood words in the language of healing. We're taught to think of it as an act of release towards someone else, an absolution, a moral duty, a turning of the other cheek. But Brené Brown's work invites a deeper truth. Real forgiveness begins within. It's not about excusing your mother's actions or pretending they didn't hurt. It's about freeing yourself from the emotional weight of carrying her mistakes inside your heart. Many of us hold on to our pain because it feels like protection. Anger becomes armor, proof that what happened mattered. Resentment becomes a form of control, a way to ensure we'll never be hurt like that again. But Brené reminds us that pain, when left unprocessed, turns into shame and bitterness. It doesn't keep us safe, it keeps us stuck, and the longer we hold it, the more it quietly drains the life out of us. Forgiveness, then, isn't about letting your mother off the hook. It's about unhooking yourself from the story that keeps you small. Your mother's actions, words, or absences may have carved deep wounds. Maybe she didn't know how to love you the way you needed. Maybe she never said the words you longed to hear. Maybe she caused harm she never acknowledged. You don't have to pretend any of it was okay, but you do get to stop carrying it like it's your burden to fix. Forgiveness in Brené's lens is a boundary, not a bridge. It says, I will no longer let your pain define my peace. This kind of forgiveness starts quietly. It begins with honesty, naming what happened without denial or distortion. Then comes compassion, not for what she did, but for the truth that she was human, limited, and flawed. When Brené speaks about wholehearted living, she emphasizes that compassion is not permission, it's perspective. It allows you to see the story with clear eyes instead of through the haze of pain. And finally, forgiveness turns inward. You forgive yourself for the years you tried to earn her love, for blaming yourself for her unhappiness, for replaying the past hoping the ending would change. You forgive the younger version of you who believed her worth was negotiable. You forgive the adult you who still sometimes aches for her approval. This is the quiet revolution of healing, reclaiming your power not by forgetting, but by releasing. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. You can forgive and still set boundaries. You can forgive and still go no contact. You can forgive and still grieve what never was. The goal isn't to rebuild a relationship that harmed you. It's to rebuild the relationship you have with yourself. Brené Brown says, let go of who you think you're supposed to be, embrace who you are. Forgiveness is that letting go. It's unclenching the fist you've held for so long, the one gripping guilt, anger, and unmet expectations. When you open that hand, you make space for something new, peace. It doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's a decision you make every morning. I choose freedom today. But over time, forgiveness stops being something you do and becomes something you are. And when that happens, the story that once bound you begins to lose its hold. One of the hardest truths Brené Brown helps us face is this: healing does not come from waiting for someone else to become who we needed them to be. It comes from shifting how we engage with the story. Many people spend years hoping their mother will apologize, understand, or finally see the pain she caused. But sometimes she can't. Sometimes she's still trapped in her own shame, denial, or fear. And sometimes she's simply unable to meet you where you need her to. When that realization hits, it can feel like grief all over again. But it's also the beginning of freedom. Your healing is not dependent on her change. It's born from your own awareness. Brené often says, we can't change other people, but we can change the boundaries of the relationship. That means deciding what kind of contact is healthy, what conversations are safe, and how much emotional energy you're willing to give. It means accepting that you may never get the version of her you wanted. And that's okay. You can love her even from a distance without betraying yourself. When you shift the focus from fixing her to understanding yourself, the dynamic begins to lose its power. You start noticing the triggers, the tone in her voice that makes you shrink, the guilt that rises when you say no, the ache of wanting her approval. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause, you breathe, you choose. That pause is where healing happens. It's where you stop being the child who needed her to change and become the adult who can hold space for both love and pain at once. This kind of emotional maturity is what Brene calls rising strong. It's the courage to sit with discomfort, to tell the truth about what hurts, and to create boundaries that honor your worth. Boundaries are not walls, they are clarity. They say, this is what's okay for me, and this is what isn't. When you set them, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop trying to win her love and start choosing your own peace. Healing the relationship with your mother doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means redefinition. Maybe you redefine what closeness looks like. Maybe you release the fantasy of a perfect mother and accept the real, imperfect woman she is. Maybe you stop seeking her validation and start validating yourself. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but each time you choose self-respect over old emotional patterns, you're rewiring the story. There will still be moments of longing, those flashes of I wish she understood me. That's human. But instead of turning that longing into self-blame, you can meet it with compassion. You can remind yourself she couldn't give what she didn't have, but I can give it to myself now. That's the quiet strength Brené's work leads us toward, radical self-trust. When you stop waiting for her to heal you, you stop being powerless. You begin to see that your worth was never in her recognition. It was always in your own awareness. Healing, then, isn't about rewriting her story. It's about reclaiming yours. You become the author, not the character trapped in her narrative. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll look back and see that she no longer defines your emotional landscape. You do. There comes a moment in every healing journey when you realize no one is coming to fill the space that was left empty. No apology, no perfect relationship, no external validation can undo the ache of unmet childhood needs. That realization is heartbreaking, but it's also profoundly empowering because that's the moment you stop looking outward for rescue and start turning inward for restoration. Brené Brown often says, owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we'll ever do. Becoming the mother to yourself is that bravery in action. Being your own mother doesn't mean pretending you never needed one. It means honoring that need and learning to meet it with compassion. It means listening to your emotions with the patience she may not have had. It means saying to yourself the words you longed to hear, you're safe now. I see you. I'm proud of you. You did nothing wrong. This is not a fantasy. It's a reparenting of the heart. You become the steady, kind presence your younger self always needed. In Brené's language of vulnerability, this act of self-mothering is the ultimate courage to open your heart to yourself, to tend to the places you once abandoned, to forgive your own humanity. The child in you who was silenced learns to speak again. The one who was unseen begins to shine. And every time you offer yourself grace instead of judgment, softness instead of shame, you rewrite the emotional inheritance your mother left behind. You stop passing pain forward and start passing wisdom. This process doesn't erase your longing for her love, There may always be a part of you that wishes she could have shown up differently. But now, that longing no longer defines you. It becomes a quiet reminder of what you're capable of giving yourself. You learn that healing isn't about having a perfect mother. It's about becoming the nurturing, safe, loving presence you once sought in her. You begin to live differently. You stop rushing to earn love and instead rest in your own enoughness. You stop hiding your feelings because now you know they deserve space. You stop repeating her patterns, not out of rebellion, but out of compassion for her, for you, and for those who come after. You start to see your mother not as the villain or the saint, but as a woman who did her best and sometimes fell short. And in that truth, you find peace. Healing, Brene teaches, is not a destination. It's a practice. Some days you'll feel grounded, other days the old wounds will whisper again. But now you have tools she didn't. You have awareness, language, and the courage to face your own heart without running. You've become the parent your soul always needed, the one who holds space for pain and still believes in joy. And that's where the story turns from survival to freedom. You will never heal by trying to change your mother, but you will heal when you begin to love yourself the way she couldn't. That's the quiet revolution of breaking generational patterns, not by fighting the past, but by nurturing the present. So when you stand in front of the mirror, tired from all the inner work, remember this truth Brené Brown lives by. You are imperfect. You are wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. That's not just a quote. It's a homecoming, the one you've been waiting for all along.